Misleading character traits. There are two steps in sifting through one's midot, or character traits. Number one, a person must develop the ability to distinguish between good and bad character traits, and learn how to channel each character trait for its proper use. The ultimate goal is that a person will be able to call on any character trait at the moment that it is needed. Number two, a person must develop the ability to break apart and cleanse each individual character trait. It is true that the superficial understanding of positive character traits is a good start to personal growth and draws one closer and closer to perfection. However, there are character traits that are naturally confusing and misleading. When one is unclear about the definition of a certain character trait, one will be led to traits that seem similar to it, even though they are negative, and do not accomplish one's goals. Therefore, a person needs to develop the ability to break apart a character trait and carefully express it with none of its possible flaws. The reason we confuse character traits. There are several reasons that a person misunderstands the definition of a character trait. One reason is that certain traits seem identical on a superficial level. Therefore, if one truly desires to retain a certain character trait, one must clearly understand and define it. If one does not clearly comprehend that character trait, one will come to a superficial and extreme version of it. Therefore, it is of utmost importance that one investigates each character trait until one can distinguish between its real definition and that which is actually unrelated to it. Humility. Humility versus low self-esteem. Humility is undoubtedly a good personality trait when a person understands what it is and how to correctly embody and internalize it. However, a misunderstanding of humility can lead to depression because the two are extremely similar. Happiness and arrogance both spread out and expand one's spiritual strengths, but happiness accomplishes this in a good way, while arrogance does this in a bad way. Humility and sadness both gather in and calm one's spiritual strengths, but humility does so positively, while sadness does so negatively. Even though these traits are externally doing the same thing, in essence they are totally distant from each other. When one believes in the enormity of one's own value and thinks this makes him worthy of great things, but then finds flaws or imperfections in oneself that seem to contradict this belief, one will be completely depressed, although there is no truth in this. Humility, on the other hand, is caused by the recognition that a person's value and ability to accomplish or receive great things are unrelated. Rather, all greatness and goodness that comes one's way are results of the kindness of God flowing down upon this person. Therefore, even when one feels lacking, one will not be sad at all. One will rather thank God for the few good things one still recognizes in oneself, and will even be energized to acquire more skills and wisdom, since this person sees that even in one's seeming unworthiness, God still showers down such kindness. Then certainly one will be able to acquire even more greatness within and without. The danger of teaching humility. When we teach people the idea of being humbled before God, but we do not explain to them the principle of divine greatness, we damage their souls, because we have trained them in a life of slavery and lowliness. Therefore, we have an obligation to first teach people about the principle of divine greatness, so that they will understand that humility before God should naturally give birth to spiritual empowerment. Indeed, if all realms of the world are one great entity, then when each small element connects itself to the divine whole, it automatically becomes empowered. True humility versus false humility. I am in search of true inner humility. Not only will it not hold back the soul's strength, spiritual joy, the development of its talents, and the increasing of its light, but it will actually be the source and motivation for these virtues. It is beneficial to be humble of spirit. Sadness. Two types of sadness. There is a lesser type of sadness that one must push away immediately without going through analysis and explanation. And then there is a greater type of sadness that comes from the heart of wise people, which demands perfection. This type of sadness recognizes the depth of negative actions and feelings, and it is pained over all types of physical and spiritual suffering. This type of sadness does not need to be pushed away, but rather guided towards its inner purpose. Sadness shows you what to fix. My heart will never give up due to any sadness in the world, for I know that this sadness comes to reveal to me a measure of imperfection in the soul, whether it be a fault due to a personal issue or one that is caused by society. Sadness comes to expose areas of pain in order to help repair and shine light into one's actions, ideas, and imagination. Excessive materialism causes sadness. We see that the tendency towards excessive materialism, separating the material from the spiritual and making it the central point of all things, brings one to deep sadness. This is because doing this blocks out the light, the source of life, in every material object, and the soul is strangled by the lack of air. Alienation from one's essence causes sadness. One's misguided actions and beliefs are responsible for the overwhelming sadness that exists in the world. When one is alienated from one's essence, whether physically or spiritually, one becomes enveloped in a damaging mindset that crushes one with continuous waves of negativity. True healing must come through spiritually realigning oneself. When one's beliefs are realigned, one's actions will realign as well. One will begin to feel the value and beauty of life, and the soul will overflow with the happiness of alignments. Sadness due to idealism. There is a type of sadness that comes from the soul's deep and holy yearning for ultimate good. Since the more one pursues this, the more one sees how far away it is, one becomes filled with despair. To be sure, this is not the same as the gloomy sadness that is caused by numbing one's heart and seeking that which is external to one's true desires. Instead, this type of sadness has its foundation in a deep inner light that tends to blind due to its intense illumination. However, when one learns to absorb the brightness within this type of sadness, one is redeemed from darkness to light. Anger. Anger that makes you lose perspective. With great anger, but in a calm and controlled way, we must despise the type of explosive anger that corrupts one's intelligence and undermines all the virtuous qualities of human beings, individually and communally. When we see any sect or group continuously speaking with anger, it is a clear sign that these people have lost perspective. They have no meaning with which to fill their emptiness. In truth, they are really just angry with themselves. It is their ego that causes them to project their venomous anger on others. The most profound thinkers who have reached the heights of justice and kindness are filled with never-ending tolerance. Kindness and truth crown them all day long. External anger. It is permissible for a person to act angry in order to create an atmosphere of respect in the home. Anger is poisonous when it lives in the depths of the soul. It is like an alien god within a person's own body. However, actions that seem like anger but are actually being done for the good purpose do not contain the destructive quality of anger. In fact, they demonstrate one's self-control. For one who is required to perform an action that is similar to a deed motivated by raging anger, yet can control oneself and channel the action towards an ethical goal, is one who is truly praiseworthy. Holy anger. Rabbi Yochanan said in the name of Rabbi Shimon Bar Yochai, "It is permissible to fight with wicked people in this world, as it is written, those who abandon the Torah praise the wicked, whilst those who observe the Torah fight the wicked." One may think that it should always be forbidden to fight another person, since this is usually motivated by the negative character trait of anger. However, expressing anger at evil by fighting with the wicked is not merely correct, but a highly ethical and intelligent act. Therefore, it is good to acquire a correct intellectual hatred of evil, even though this involves a form of anger on a personal level. Jealousy. The danger of jealousy. Each spiritual path is unique. Each world is a world unto itself. From one's own world, another person's unique path may appear to be a wasteland of darkness, even though for that person it is truly full of productivity and light. Therefore, each person must be very careful to clarify the boundaries of one's own world. If one decides to take a peek into another person's world, one must be careful to protect oneself. One must only take a peek and not linger in another's world for too long, for one may uproot oneself from one's own world, and one cannot be absorbed into a strange new world. It is possible to be a guest in another's world momentarily, but in trying to establish one's home there, one will find oneself living among scorpions, constricted and isolated in darkness. As it is written, "Why, my son, should you stumble with a strange woman? Drink water from your own container, flowing water from your own well." Jealousy of others' talents leads to depression. One can sometimes fall into despair upon hearing of some great talent that one is lacking. One can begin to think of oneself as nothing. Depression will begin to darken the shine of one's soul. Indeed, one's entire spiritual identity becomes gloomy when comparing oneself to another person who possesses talents that one lacks. And therefore, a person must strengthen oneself and not be jealous of someone else's portion. One must learn to be truly happy with one's own portion. Holy jealousy. Jealousy of wise people increases knowledge. Without jealousy of wise people, one would only be motivated to imagine, learn, and create that which one is naturally drawn towards. This brings great blessings with it, since the greatest beauty comes from directing one's efforts towards one's own inner drives and talents. Nevertheless, richness and complexity are formed in a person as a result of having access to many different beliefs and ideas. Jealousy of wise people motivates immersion in beliefs towards which one is not naturally drawn, and thereby wisdom increases in the world. At the end of days, knowledge will become so advanced that the world will be perfected through the unification of all ideas and expertise. Humankind will reach a state where one will no longer have to be jealous of another's knowledge in order to advance one's own wisdom. Arrogance. Why do we seek external approval? The less self-worth one feels, the more one will seek external approval. Only when one feels lowly in one's soul does one desire to be admired and praised by others, both for what one has and also for what one does not have. Therefore, one has a responsibility to increase one's sense of self-worth. As a consequence, one's language and relationship towards oneself and others will be adjusted appropriately. Arrogance ignores introspection. When one ignores the negativity inside oneself, does not focus on improvement, does not recognize the ugliness of that negativity, and then believes oneself to be righteous, this is the essence of arrogance. However, when a person works on self-improvement at all moments, to transform the bad to good, the bitter to sweet, the darkness to light, to honestly feel the spiritual pain inside, to be aware of one's own imperfections, such a person is considered a master of introspection. Arrogance destroys desire for improvement. Arrogance deadens a person's will, and when one's will is weak, no potential goodness can become actualized. Holy pride. One must analyze the feelings of pride that exist inside one's soul and learn to distinguish between arrogance, which ruins one's relationship to oneself as well as to God, and self-confidence, which expands one's mind and reminds oneself of one's spiritual significance. It often happens that one's heart is flooded with confidence, which at first glance appears to be arrogant. Yet, when examining the feeling, one will find that it is instead the filling of one's soul with divine assurance. If one attempts to distance oneself from this arrogance, not only is one doing nothing for one's soul, but one will also cripple all of one's spiritual strengths. This will lead to depression, and one will believe that this depression is closeness to God when it is in fact ultimate distance from Him. Holy self-love. One's love for oneself can express itself in an unsophisticated way and become corrupted, motivating evil actions and creating bad character traits. The greater one's talents and abilities, the more this destruction of oneself will bring about the destruction to the world. On the other hand, love for oneself can be holy and ideal. It all depends on how much one perfects one's mind, feelings and actions. For when one improves oneself and one's good side grows and fills one's entire being, one's perspective on reality becomes illuminated with joy, because one is looking at the inner value of all things, and really truly is good. And reality truly is good when a person looking at it, living it, and acting within it is good. Beware of false humility. Sometimes a person will become extremely confident because of an influx of holy pride. It is at this moment that such a person is at the level of the Holy of Holies and speaks words of fire. In this state, one becomes furious at any low spirit that tries to feed one with false humility. For in truth, this confidence is filled with humility that is combined with strength, happiness, and a love of seeing everyone succeed. Submission is not the ideal religious trait. The great visionaries experience the highest levels of freedom. They are unable to be involved in any form of submission, because all types of submission are really submission to human beings. In fact, even accepting the kingship of heaven in the usual way the masses do is a form of submission to human beings. the understanding of the kingship of heaven has fallen from its ideal state, and its light has become darkened by human beings' limitations. The ultimate yearning for freedom is the ideal version of teshuvah.